Hi, Dave Roscoe here. It is Wednesday, November 19th, 2025, and I wasn't going to do a video today, but there is a new white paper that is circulating, and everybody's attaching a whole lot of meaning to it, and I need to bring some sanity into this equation. So we're going to talk about that new white paper, but first, the metrics. The circulating supply is 8.31 billion pi, and there were 1,219 user accounts migrated yesterday, totaling 275,000 pi. The Pi migration wallet is at 47.9 million pi, and migrations are not happening now. Like I mentioned yesterday, they stopped middle of the day yesterday, and they have not resumed. The migrated unlock rewards are at 3.27 billion pi, with 4.1 million pi unlocked in the last 24 hours, and now free to be traded on the open markets. The big scuttlebutt on the social media is this MiCA Whitepaper. Everybody is thinking that this is a big deal and that the Pi network is applying for admission into the European Union markets. And I don't see it that way. Let me explain. In 2023, crypto regulations were passed across the European Union to homogenize how cryptos must operate within the European Union. And that was the MiCA. So that stands for Markets in Crypto Assets. So it's specifically designed to regulate the crypto markets. Now, again, it was introduced in 2023. It went into effect in 2024, and the compliance to those regulations runs all the way up to 2026, depending on who you are, what your assets are, and what your asset classes are, and so these regulations were put in place to start to bring the crypto market under control. As most of you know, it's mostly a wild, wild west, and a lot of people get scammed and ripped off all over the place. And if you're going to participate in the global markets, that can't be allowed. At least not unless it's very sophisticated. Obviously thefts occur in the securities and with fiat currencies, but the consequences are very well known, very well enforced, and it takes a sophisticated thief to pull it off. Crypto, not so much. There's a lot of anonymity and lack of enforceability, and a lot of people get hurt, and that's just not going to fly if you want to integrate with the existing global finance machine. So the European Union came up with MiCA to address this situation. And the Pi network has introduced a white paper that is being submitted to the MiCA either review board or whatever you want to call it. And everyone's thinking that this is the Pi network, like moving up and wanting to, embed itself into the European Union markets. And that's not the case. Okay. The Pi network is already trading in many European markets. Not all, just like hell, even in the United States, you can't get Pi in every state in the United States. Because each state has its own regulatory requirements. However, Pi network and the Pi coin are trading in Europe, okay, even in European Union countries. The only reason the Pi network is introducing this MiCA white paper is because they have to. It is a requirement of the MiCA regulations that all crypto projects submit their white papers by December 2025. Now, it's not all of them. It depends on what class you are, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But the Pi network falls under the class that has to have their white paper submitted by December 2025. And this is not to allow them to trade in the European Union because they're already doing that. What this is doing is satisfying a pre-existing deadline to continue trading. From this point forward, new cryptos will have to do this up front. Cryptos that were already trading prior to a certain date were allowed to continue, but by a certain date, they had to submit their compliance documents, and this is one of them. Okay, so if you're listening to all of the hype saying this is a big deal, it's not a big deal. Now, and I've done some research. I have absolutely no evidence that any European markets have excluded Pi because they have not submitted compliance to the MiCA standard or to the MiCA regulations. This has not been a blockade for Pi. So introducing this doesn't necessarily open them up to markets they were excluded from before, which is what some people are saying. But what it really does is allow the Pi network to continue to trade in the European Union. And that is very important. Now, there is one thing that is interesting, and that the Pi coin is clearly stated as not being a utility token, and that's on page 7. So right here in 05, you can see statements in accordance with Article 6.5. Point D of Regulation EU 2023-1114 on whether the Pi token is a utility token. Now, and here it's false. And a lot of people have been latching onto this, asking what the heck's going on. Okay. Now, I'm not going to read this white paper. I will provide a link in the description of this video. You're free to read it, on your free time. And I recommend that you do. But the reason why the Pi network is not listed as a utility token under these regulations is because these regulations specify a very tight the definition of what a utility token is. Even though the Pi network has always advertised itself as being a utility token, it does not meet these requirements. So it cannot be listed as a utility token on European Union exchanges. But that's okay. It doesn't mean that the Pi network can't be a utility token. The Pi token can still do whatever it is it needs to do. It's just not considered a utility token within the European Union. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So a lot of people are latching onto this, thinking that this has some bearing on the GCV argument, the dual value argument, and all this other stuff. It doesn't. Okay. It doesn't change anything about the vision of the Pi network, just what it's categorized as in a particular market, in this case, the European Union. So don't let that fool you. So who's really affected by this? When these regulations went into place, most cryptos were not affected, including Pi, but they did have a timeline by which they had to meet compliance. I will tell you this, some stable coins were immediately affected, such as USDT, because USDT did not meet the guidelines for this, and stablecoins are a different class of asset that had to meet very strict requirements up front. They could not be grandfathered in like other crypto assets because they're stablecoins, and stablecoins are a special beast. So some stablecoins were immediately excluded from European markets because they did not have MiCA compliance. But again, that doesn't apply to the Pi network and the Pi coin. So the coin is currently pumping a little bit. It got up to over 24 cents, and it's now down to 23.9, and it was lower than that, and it's oscillating. And I sent out a message saying to be careful. Right now, because of all the hype around this MiCA white paper, people are attributing it to all kinds of good things that are happening. And I'm going to reiterate, I don't see this being that big of a deal. The deadlines are well known, and to me, it just looks like the Pi network is complying with those deadlines. within the time frames. They have to do this. They don't have a choice. And it doesn't mean that they're doing anything new. It just allows them to continue doing what they're already doing. And that's not a big deal. Now, I'm happy to be wrong on this. And it may actually open them up to other European markets, but I don't think that's going to result in anything big happening right away, due to the submission of this white paper. So right now, let's just consider this a requirement of doing business, and that the ability to continue is the positive note. Not that it's going to harbor anything new and big, just the ability to continue operating is the news. And if anything better comes out of this, we'll be pleasantly surprised. But right now, what we're seeing is false hype. This is hype that does not have any basis in reality. People are interpreting these events in a way that makes them think that something big is happening, and they're pulling the market up. And it's going to crash. In my opinion, this is not going to hold, which is why I said to be careful. I hope this helps you put this MiCA white paper into perspective. I am happy to be wrong. I'd be thrilled to be wrong. But knowing what I know about the MiCA regulations, this was something that all crypto projects had to do by a certain deadline. And if they didn't, they could not do business in the European Union. And everything points to the Pi Network simply doing its due diligence to comply with these regulations. So, if anything breaks, I'll be sure to let you know. But until then, don't panic, stay the course, and remember, the success of the Pi Network begins with you. Pi to the moon. Peace.